I'm Daniel Reed, 35, and tonight I'm sitting at the dining table in my Chicago apartment, hoping for a quiet family dinner. The city lights flicker outside the window, but inside, everything feels tense. My sister, Melissa, across from me, stirs her food with little enthusiasm. I've been looking forward to this evening. After weeks of busy work and endless meetings, I wanted something simple. A chance to reconnect with family. Instead, the atmosphere is thick with unspoken words and awkward silences. I glance at Melissa, trying to read her expression. She's usually the warm one, the sibling I could always count on during tough times. But something's different tonight. Her eyes are sharp, almost calculating, and there's a rigidity in her posture I don't remember seeing before. I try to push aside the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine, but it's impossible. Then, out of nowhere, she breaks the silence. "Daniel," she says, voice steady but firm. "I want to talk about Dad's inheritance." My fork clinks against my plate as I stop mid-bite. I blink, surprised by the sudden shift. Melissa's words hang in the air like a challenge, and my heart tightens. This wasn't part of the plan. I thought tonight was about catching up, maybe sharing a laugh or two. Instead, I'm caught off guard by the weight of her demand. She's asking me to share the inheritance, the money, the assets, everything Dad left behind, as if I had any choice in the matter. I swallow hard, feeling a mix of shock and disbelief. For years, I've been the one managing everything since Dad passed away, handling bills, keeping the estate in order, making sure everything ran smoothly while Melissa drifted away, busy with her own life. And now, she's sitting here, looking me in the eye as if I owe her everything. "Melissa, I didn't expect this," I say carefully, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why now? Why bring this up tonight?" She leans forward, eyes locked onto mine, her tone unwavering. "Because it's time, Daniel. You've had full control for too long, and I think it's only fair we share what Dad left us equally." The words sting. You think I've been in control? I've been the one keeping this all together, dealing with lawyers, paying the taxes, making sure the house is maintained. You've been what? Absent? Busy with your own life? Melissa's expression hardens. "That's not fair. I've had my reasons, Daniel. But that doesn't mean I don't deserve a share. Dad wanted us both to have what's rightfully ours." The room feels smaller suddenly, the walls closing in on me. I think back to the day Dad died, how I took on the responsibility, without hesitation, putting my own life on hold to manage the estate. I remember the sleepless nights, the phone calls with lawyers, the endless paperwork that no one else seemed to want to touch. And now, after all that, Melissa is demanding a cut, acting as if I've been hoarding something that belongs to both of us. I glance at her, searching for a hint of remorse or understanding, but all I see is determination. This isn't just about fairness, it's about entitlement, and it feels like a slap in the face. I try to breathe, steadying myself. "Melissa, I get it. You want your share. But this isn't just money to me. It's Dad's legacy, and I've been trying to honor that by keeping everything intact. I'm not the enemy here." She sighs, her shoulders slumping slightly, but her eyes don't waver. "I'm not trying to be the enemy, Daniel. I just want what's mine. You manage things, yes, but that doesn't mean you get to decide everything on your own." The tension around the table is thick enough to choke on. We both sit back, the silence stretching between us. I can feel the weight of years of unspoken grievances pressing down, threatening to suffocate what remains of our sibling bond. I remember the last time Dad was alive, how he used to remind us to stick together, to support one another no matter what. But tonight, it feels like those words were empty promises. The inheritance, instead of bringing us closer, has created a chasm wide enough to fall into. I reach for my glass of water, hands trembling slightly. "Melissa, I don't want this to turn into a fight. I want us to find a way through this. But you have to understand, it's complicated. There are legal things to consider, and emotions, lots of them." She nods slowly, but the spark in her eyes remains. I know it's complicated, but I need you to hear me. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for what's fair. We both lost Dad, and we both deserve to have a say. Her words echo in my mind as I try to process the moment. The dinner, which I hoped would be a warm reunion, has turned into a battlefield of expectations and resentment. I realize that this conversation isn't just about money. It's about acknowledgement, about respect, and about the invisible debts we owe each other as family. I glance at the empty chair beside me, thinking of the years that have passed since Dad left. The moments I spent trying to keep everything together while Melissa stepped back. The sacrifices I made to keep the estate afloat, often alone and overwhelmed. And now, here she is, standing her ground, demanding a piece of the life I've been trying to preserve. I feel a pang of frustration, but also a flicker of something else, hope. Maybe this confrontation is the beginning of something necessary, even if it's painful. Maybe it's time to face these issues head on, instead of letting them fester in silence. I look back at Melissa, her face serious but vulnerable beneath the tough exterior. Okay, I say quietly. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out what's fair. But we need to be honest with each other. No more assumptions, no more silence. She nods, a small sigh escaping her lips. I want that too, Daniel. I want us to be family again. As the plates sit half-eaten and the city hums outside, I know this conversation is just the beginning. There's a long road ahead, filled with difficult discussions and hard decisions. But for the first time in a long while, I feel like maybe, just maybe, we can find a way through the storm. Tonight, I'm not just managing an inheritance. I'm confronting the tangled web of family expectations, loyalty, and the complicated ties that bind us. And as uncomfortable as it is, I'm ready to face it. Because in the end, family means more than money. It means finding a way to heal, no matter how painful the process. In the quiet hours after that dinner, I found myself alone in my living room, the city's hum filtering through the windows, but unable to drown out the noise in my head. Melissa's demand to share Dad's inheritance echoed relentlessly, stirring memories I had tried to tuck away. It wasn't just about the money. This was a reckoning with everything that had happened since Dad passed, and the complicated role I'd played in our family's unraveling. I thought back to the day Dad died, the weight of loss pressing down like a heavy fog. I'd stepped up without hesitation, managing the estate, coordinating with lawyers, paying bills, and keeping the house from falling apart. It was a responsibility I took seriously, even if it meant late nights and canceled plans. I remember feeling alone in it, like I was carrying the family's legacy on my shoulders while Melissa drifted away, caught up in her own world. There were times I resented her absence, the way she seemed to avoid the messy details and left me to navigate the chaos. Yet, I never voiced those feelings. I didn't want to fracture what little connection we had left. Instead, I buried the frustration deep inside, convincing myself that family meant sacrifice. I was the one holding the pieces together, and I'd keep doing it, no matter the cost. But Melissa's words from tonight cracked that foundation. She wasn't just asking for money. She was asking for recognition, for a place at the table she'd been absent from. I pulled out my phone and called Laura, my closest friend and confidant. Her voice was steady and warm as she answered, a comforting anchor amid the storm swirling in my mind. Hey, Daniel. What's up? You sound heavy. I hesitated, then let the floodgate open. It's Melissa. She wants a share of Dad's inheritance. Tonight, at dinner, she just laid it out like it's a demand. I'm stuck, Laura. I don't know how to handle this. There was a pause on the other end. That's a lot, Daniel. But it makes sense, she'd want to say. You've been managing everything for years. Exactly, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. I've been the one doing all the work, dealing with lawyers, paying taxes, keeping the house from falling apart. And now she's here, acting like I've been hiding something from her, like I'm the villain. Laura's tone softened. I get why you feel that way. But maybe it's not about villainy. Maybe she's hurt, feeling left out or powerless. Sometimes people don't express things until they boil over. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I never wanted it to come to this. I thought handling the estate would keep us connected, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have involved her more. Maybe, Laura agreed gently. But it's not too late. You can still find a way to make this work. It'll take patience and honesty. But you're not alone in this. Her words gave me some clarity. I realized I had been carrying the burden silently, assuming Melissa's absence was disinterest rather than pain or confusion. And maybe she had been holding on to resentment too, feeling sidelined while I made decisions that affected us both. I spent the next few days reflecting on our family's history, the years after Dad's death, when everything changed. I remembered how I juggled my own life, career, and the invisible responsibilities that came with managing the estate. I thought about Melissa's absence, her frustration with the family's expectations, and how we gradually drifted apart. Was I holding on to control because I feared losing what little connection we had? Was I protecting Dad's legacy, or was I just protecting my own sense of order in a world turned upside down? These questions gnawed at me, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths about how I'd handled things. I also thought about fairness, what it truly meant in this situation. Melissa deserved a share, of course, but I wondered how to balance that with the efforts I'd made to keep everything afloat. I realized that fairness wasn't just about equal splits. It was about understanding each other's sacrifices and struggles. One afternoon, I met up with Laura at our favorite coffee shop, a quiet spot where we could talk without distractions. I laid out everything. Melissa's demand, my feelings of frustration and betrayal, and my uncertainty about how to move forward. Laura listened carefully, then said, "You're doing the right thing by reflecting on this, but you also need to set boundaries. Being fair doesn't mean letting yourself get steamrolled. You have every right to protect what you've built." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. That's what scares me, the thought of losing control, of opening this up and having it spiral. But it's necessary, she said firmly. If you don't address it now, it'll fester. You need to have those honest conversations with Melissa. Lay everything on the table. Your efforts, her feelings, the legal side. Only then can you find a path forward. Her advice resonated with me. I realized I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable confrontation. The inheritance wasn't just about money. It was a symbol of everything our family had been through, the good and the bad. And if I wanted to preserve any chance of healing, I had to face it head on. That night, back in my apartment, I started drafting notes for the conversation I knew I'd have to have with Melissa again. I wanted to be clear, fair, and honest. No more assumptions or hidden resentments. I reminded myself that this was about more than dividing assets. It was about rebuilding trust. As I wrote, I thought about Dad and what he would have wanted. He was always about family first, about finding strength and unity even when things were difficult. I needed to honor that, even if it meant uncomfortable talks and vulnerable moments. Despite the anxiety that gnawed at me, I felt a flicker of resolve. This was my responsibility, not just as the executor of Dad's estate, but as a brother. I owed it to myself, to Melissa, and to our family to try and find a solution that respected both our sides. In the days that followed, I steeled myself for the conversations ahead. I knew there would be tension, maybe even conflict. But I also held on to the hope that through honesty and openness, we might bridge the gap that had grown between us. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I was ready to face it, because sometimes the hardest paths are the ones that lead to the most meaningful change. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was beginning to see a way forward. The day I decided to confront Melissa again, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination swirling inside me. The weight of our conversation hung over me like a storm cloud, but I knew that avoiding it any longer would only make things worse. We needed clarity, boundaries, and above all, honesty. I invited her back to my apartment, hoping a calm setting would help us finally unpack the tangled emotions and expectations that had been festering for months. When she arrived, the usual warmth between us was tempered by tension. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the evening light casting long shadows. I could see the resolve in her eyes, but also a flicker of vulnerability that reminded me of the sister I once knew. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice before I spoke. "Melissa, I want to be clear about where I stand," I began. "I've been managing the estate since Dad passed, and I've put a lot of time and effort into keeping everything together. I'm not trying to exclude you or keep you in the dark, but there are legal and financial complexities that can't be ignored." She nodded, folding her hands on the table. "I understand that, Daniel. But I also need to know that my rights and interests are protected. I don't want to be left out or blindsided." I pulled out a folder I'd prepared earlier, feeling the weight of the papers inside. I've already consulted with Emily Carter, the attorney handling the estate. We drafted a will soon after Dad passed, outlining how the assets are to be distributed. It was done in accordance with Dad's wishes, and it reflects an equal share between us. Melissa's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her face. "Equal share? Then why does it feel like you've had exclusive control over everything?" I sighed, wishing I had been more open from the start. It wasn't about control. I was trying to keep things stable, handling the day-to-day details so you wouldn't have to worry. But I realize now that by not involving you, I made you feel shut out. That wasn't my intention. She looked down, then back up with a steadier gaze. "I appreciate that, Daniel. I just want to be part of the process. I want transparency and respect." We spent the next hour going over the details of the will, the estate's assets, and the responsibilities that came with them. I explained the legal framework Emily had set up to prevent disputes and protect both our interests. For the first time, Melissa asked questions not out of accusation but curiosity, a sign she wanted to understand, not just claim. At one point she paused and said, "I guess I was afraid that if I pushed too hard before, I'd lose what little connection we have. Maybe I thought if I stayed silent, things would stay peaceful." Her words hit me hard. I realized how much fear and uncertainty had shaped our fractured relationship. We weren't just arguing over money. We were grappling with vulnerability, loss, and the shifting dynamics of a family trying to heal. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "We can rebuild that connection, Melissa. But it has to be based on honesty and mutual respect. I'm willing to share information and involve you more in decisions moving forward." She squeezed my hand lightly, a small but meaningful gesture. "Thank you, Daniel. That means a lot." As we talked, I also took the opportunity to address the elephant in the room, her past distance from the estate's affairs. "I want to be honest with you," I said. "There were times when I felt you weren't interested or willing to help. Managing everything became overwhelming, and I thought I was doing what was best." Melissa nodded slowly. "I admit, I struggled with my own feelings after Dad's death. I didn't know how to cope, and I thought stepping back would make things easier. But I see now that it created a gap between us." The conversation shifted from confrontation to collaboration. We discussed ways to share responsibilities going forward, including involving Emily in regular updates and decisions. We talked about creating a schedule for joint meetings and setting clear communication channels to avoid misunderstandings. By the end of the evening, the tension that had clouded our relationship began to lift, replaced by a tentative hope. I realized that our dispute wasn't just about money or control. It was about reclaiming the trust and connection that had frayed over time. As Melissa left, I felt a cautious optimism. We hadn't solved everything, but we'd taken a crucial step toward healing. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt we were moving in the right direction. Later that night, I spoke with Emily Carter, my attorney, to confirm the next steps. She reassured me that the will was sound and that with clear communication and cooperation between Melissa and me, future conflicts could be minimized. We discussed formalizing the plan for shared management and updating the legal documents if necessary to reflect our new arrangement. Emily's professionalism and guidance gave me a sense of security. I felt empowered knowing that the legal framework was in place to protect both our interests while allowing room for flexibility and collaboration. Reflecting on the day, I understood that confronting Melissa had been difficult but necessary. It forced us to face uncomfortable truths and lay everything bare, but it also opened the door to rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of transparency and respect. I thought about the years since Dad's passing, the sacrifices, the misunderstandings, the silence that had grown between us. Tonight, those walls began to crumble. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was ours to walk together. As I prepared for bed, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Protecting Dad's legacy wasn't just about managing assets. It was about honoring the family he cherished. And that meant healing the wounds between Melissa and me, no matter how challenging the journey. I knew the road ahead would demand patience, forgiveness, and courage. But for now, I took comfort in the progress we'd made. The conversation with Melissa was a turning point, a moment when honesty replaced assumptions and hope pushed through the shadows. Tomorrow, I would continue working with Emily to finalize the legal details and prepare for the changes ahead. But tonight, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward together. The days that followed our conversation felt like the first breath after being underwater too long, uncertain but filled with cautious hope. I was determined to turn our fragile truce into something stronger, something lasting. I reached out to Emily Carter, my attorney, to start finalizing the updates we'd discussed. I wanted to make sure our new arrangement was not just a promise but a legally protected reality. Emily was thorough and professional as always, guiding me through the necessary steps to revise the will and formalize the shared management of Dad's estate. Together, we crafted clear guidelines that outlined Melissa's involvement and ensured her rights were respected, while also protecting the work I'd put into maintaining everything over the years. It was a balance between fairness and practicality, and I felt a sense of relief knowing the documents would minimize future disputes. But legal safeguards alone wouldn't heal the emotional wounds or rebuild trust overnight. I knew that setting firm boundaries was essential, not just with Melissa, but with the entire family. The dynamic had shifted, and I needed to make that clear. At our next family gathering, I took a quiet moment to address everyone. I want us to move forward with respect and clear communication, I said. The estate is a shared responsibility now, and that means we all need to honor each other's roles and boundaries. No more assumptions or demands without discussion. There was some surprise, but also nods of agreement. I could see that the family was ready for this new chapter, even if the road ahead would be challenging. With boundaries set, I focused on building a healthier relationship with Melissa. We started regular check-ins, sharing updates and decisions before they became issues. It wasn't always smooth. Old habits and frustrations surfaced, but we tackled each hurdle with honesty and a shared commitment to improvement. One afternoon, as we reviewed some paperwork together, Melissa paused and smiled, a genuine warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. "Thanks for including me, Daniel. It feels good to be part of this." Her words struck a chord. I realized that empowerment wasn't just about control. It was about trust and respect. By stepping back and inviting her in, I was strengthening our bond and honoring Dad's legacy in a way I hadn't before. Professionally, I felt a renewed sense of control over my life and my legacy. The pressure of managing everything alone had been overwhelming, but now, with clear roles and support, I could breathe easier. I focused more on my career, confident that the family matters were being handled fairly and transparently. At the same time, I noticed a subtle shift in the family dynamics. Melissa seemed more engaged, and our parents, who had been cautious observers, began to show signs of relief. They could see that we were working together rather than at odds. Still, I remained vigilant. I knew the importance of maintaining these boundaries and the need for ongoing communication. I set up shared calendars, group messages, and regular meetings with Emily to ensure everyone stayed informed and involved. This assertiveness gave me a quiet confidence. I was no longer the sole bearer of responsibility or the gatekeeper of the estate. Instead, I was part of a team, bound by respect and shared purpose. One evening, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the city, I reflected on how far we'd come. The tension and resentment that once threatened to tear us apart had begun to dissolve, replaced by a tentative but growing partnership. I thought about the lessons learned, the importance of honesty, the courage to set boundaries, and the strength found in collaboration. It wasn't easy, and I knew challenges would still come, but I felt ready to face them. In that moment, I realized that reclaiming control wasn't about dominance. It was about balance. It was about protecting what mattered, while allowing space for others to contribute and grow. As the city lights twinkled beneath me, I felt a quiet pride in the progress we'd made. Our family was far from perfect, but we were moving towards something better. A future built on mutual respect and understanding. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly empowered, ready to steer my life and legacy with clarity and confidence. Months have passed since I took the steps to formalize the shared management of Dad's estate with Melissa, and the shift in our family dynamics has been both profound and unexpected. The tension that once clouded every interaction has eased, replaced by a tentative but genuine effort to rebuild trust and understanding. It hasn't been easy. Old wounds sometimes flare up and there are moments of frustration, but overall, I've seen a change in how we relate to one another. Melissa, who once seemed distant and reluctant to engage with the estate, has grown more involved and responsible. I watch her take initiative, asking questions, attending meetings with Emily, and contributing ideas for preserving Dad's legacy. It's like seeing a new side of her, a side that I hadn't known was waiting beneath the surface. Our conversations have become more collaborative, less confrontational, and I feel a sense of partnership that had been missing for years. Our parents, too, have noticed the difference. During a recent family gathering, Mom pulled me aside quietly. "Daniel," she said, her voice tinged with relief, "I can see you and Melissa are working through things. It's good to see you both coming together. Dad would be proud." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I thought back to the long, difficult journey from managing the estate alone, to opening the door for Melissa's involvement, to setting clear boundaries and fostering honest communication. It had been a path fraught with challenges, but one that ultimately led us closer to the family Dad had always wanted us to be. I found peace in knowing that I acted with integrity throughout this process. I didn't let resentment or frustration dictate my decisions. Instead, I chose to face the hard truths and work toward a fair resolution. That choice has given me a renewed sense of self-respect and clarity. The estate is no longer a source of contention, but a symbol of what we can achieve together. Melissa and I have even begun discussing plans for future investments and ways to honor Dad's memory that reflect both our visions. It's a collaboration that feels hopeful and promising. Of course, this transformation hasn't erased the past. The years of silence and misunderstanding still linger in the background, reminders of how fragile family ties can be when strained by unspoken grievances. But those reminders no longer hold the power to divide us. Instead, they serve as lessons in patience, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to rebuild. I've also learned that setting boundaries was crucial. By clearly defining roles and expectations, I protected myself from being overwhelmed and ensured that respect became the foundation of our interactions. This balance allowed me to focus on my career and personal growth without being consumed by family conflicts. Looking back, I realized that standing firm in my values was not about being unyielding, but about honoring what was rightfully mine while remaining open to reconciliation. It took courage to say no when necessary and to demand respect, but it also took humility to listen and adapt. Now, when I think about the future, I'm filled with cautious optimism. The family is not perfect, and there will undoubtedly be challenges ahead, but the groundwork has been laid for healthier relationships and more honest communication. I still remember the days when Melissa's demand for a share of the inheritance felt like a threat, a challenge that shook my sense of stability, but it became a catalyst for growth for both of us. It forced me to confront my assumptions, to open the door to dialogue, and to redefine what family means in the wake of loss. As I sit in my Chicago apartment, looking out at the city skyline, I feel a quiet pride in how far we've come. The estate is no longer just a collection of assets. It's a testament to resilience, compromise, and the enduring bonds of family. I hope that sharing my story encourages others facing similar struggles to find strength in honesty and the courage to protect what matters most. Family can be complicated, messy, and painful, but it can also be a source of profound healing and growth. I've learned that protecting your legacy isn't just about legal documents or financial assets. It's about standing firm in your values, setting boundaries, and fostering relationships built on respect and understanding. This journey has transformed me, teaching me that true empowerment comes not from control, but from the ability to navigate conflict with grace and integrity. And as I look toward the future, I'm ready to continue building a life and family grounded in those principles. Thank you for listening. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.